We will get started in just a couple minutes. We have a few people still getting through the food line. But in the meantime, as you're meeting the people at your table and getting introduced, would also love you to participate in our first poll this morning. We're going to have a QR code up here on the screen, so you can take out your phone, you can either shoot that, go to the website, but we're going to have a question here to get started, and then we'll have some other polls throughout the morning. But the practice poll is, what is your favorite sport this season? So get started on that, and we'll be back in a couple minutes. Wow, that's a pretty overwhelming result. So over half the room has chosen football as their favorite fall sport. I think that's fair. Personally, I'm a basketball fan, and so I'm having a little bit of withdrawals with the Lynx being over, but excited to see the Timberwolves kick it off here shortly. The Good Leadership Breakfast is a dynamic force of good leaders who are improving the way their organizations perform because they know goodness pays. I want to welcome you here. This is the 111th meeting of the Good Leadership Breakfast. It is the second of two in a fall series with a theme around building a culture of healthy accountability. Does that resonate with anyone? Okay. How many people are here for the first time this morning? All right, welcome. We are so happy to have you here. Before we kick off this morning, we're going to watch a short video from our title sponsor, Old National Bank. My name is Julie McDonough. I'm the Minnesota Market President for Old National Bank. I've been a friend of Good Leadership and a co-host of this breakfast for many years, and excited to share a video with you here.
Right now at Old National, we've got this incredible checking offer.
Hey.
Hi.
What?
He's here for the checking.
I love checking.
Okay. You know what? For a bonus that big, fine. Bring on the checking.
Oh, it's not that type of checking. You just download the app.
Yeah, no, I'm stretching. Where do I sign?
Earn up to a $450 bonus when you open a checking account at Old National, official bank of the Big Ten.
All right. So we like to have a little fun, and we are sports fans at Old National. We have a partnership with the Big Ten and like to have a little fun with that. I'd like to welcome to the stage the CEO of Wealth Management for Old National, Shadi Alomar. Tell us why Old National is a sponsor here.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie. Well, talking about stretching, I reached out yesterday to my glove compartment and I pulled a muscle in my back. So for you young people, enjoy your healthy life, you know. This is your future. You just stretch and you pull a muscle and you're injured. But today, actually, we're representing a bank. Today I want to talk about emotions, actually, instead of banks, why we sponsor this. Most banks, just like your companies, we produce almost the same things. We don't have a better checking account. Yeah, we may put an offer here and there, but the reality is that we spend a lot of time thinking about the client experience. How do we feel? How do our clients feel? That's really what differentiates us. We just spent actually 3 days with Good Leadership at our headquarters in Evansville, talking about that client experience. Yes, we have products, yes, we have investments, all that, but at the end of the day, do we use our own products? I'm a client of Old National. Do we want our friends to use our own products? So same thing with your company. And what really differentiates you, it's not the products anymore. AI, whatever, will replace all of that stuff. What will really differentiate you is, how do you make people feel? Do they feel valued, excited, cared for? And that's what we do at Old National. That's why I'm proud of what we're doing and what we're working for. We do have the products and services, but it's about the community. It's about making sure everybody have the same opportunity and a chance to succeed in life financially, as well as whatever they want to achieve in their goals. So that's why we've been sponsoring this gathering for a while now. We believe in the community, and I believe in being together, something that AI will never replace, right? This is why we're here. We want to be together. We want to feel good. So this morning, think about, how are you going to make others feel as they walk out of this breakfast? And that's why we're here. That's why we're sponsoring. Thank you.
And now it's time for me to introduce the creator of the Good Leadership Breakfast. He's an informed optimist, a contrarian who pushes back against the bad news bias in the media, and a thought leader on organizational effectiveness. Please join me in welcoming to the stage a role model for how goodness pays, the founder and CEO of Good Leadership, Paul Batz.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
I'll give you that.
Thank you. Gosh, where does the time go? It's already October. It looks like the weather's going to be good for Halloween. That's a good thing, right? I really, really wish that I would have said basketball on the opening poll, because I said football, and I felt bad because last month, right here, we had Ethan Casson, and he gave me this awesome signed jersey by, Anthony Edwards, and so I took off my green jacket and put on the jersey. It was one of those moments where I actually felt tall and handsome. Yeah, no, it was awesome, and I'm going to have to fess up to Ethan that I said football in the report this morning. So I just love these fall breakfasts. I am a driven guy. I love the pace, and fall is like, we know it's back to school time, but it may as well be New Year's when it comes to the business cycle. Everything just speeds up, and I love it. And immediately after the breakfast last month, my wife Melinda and I, Melinda's here, we took a 2-week vacation to Portugal and Spain with some friends of ours. It was an amazing opportunity, and I brought home a little gift called a sinus infection. And then I took that gift on a trip to New York, to Washington, D.C., New York, Long Island, and then I was earlier this week in Indiana, and I'm glad that the gift is going away, because we're actually going to leave on Sunday and go to our home down in Phoenix to soak up some sun down there. So it's a really, really busy time. The business speeds up, and I just love it. We're crescendoing the fall series of the breakfast towards the Good Leadership Conference, which is in this room on November 22nd. It's a user group conference. It's the people that helped us pay for and participated in the research, which means that this is the last breakfast of this year. We'll talk about the next breakfast coming towards the end of this conversation today. If you're new to us, this is a very interactive conversation. We know a lot about what it takes for adults to learn new things. You walk in this room with stuff in your head. Lots of, because I do things because of this, and lots of shoulds. What we try to do is put some coulds in your head, and we're going to shift the way you think about certain things, and hopefully it'll motivate you to go back to the office and do something differently to improve the performance of your organization. One of the ways we do that is through our audience polling. You took a poll early. It was kind of a silly question about what's your favorite sport. I'm sure my friends in the NFL don't think that question was silly. And then we're going to do an exercise here shortly. We've got a model that we use in our coaching practice that we're going to introduce you to. There'll be some table discussions. Then I'm going to introduce you to someone I think is a really, really good leader in Craig Warren. And then we're going to give away some money to a favorite charity. So start thinking about who you would give the money to if you win. And then it's all about this idea that our mission is to radiate goodness. We do that through good leaders because we've proven that goodness pays. So thank you for joining us. And right now, I'd love to introduce you to our sponsor, Irish Titan, who is, Darren Lynch has been one of our partners for years and years and years. He's standing in the back of the room. And I think we have a video to run for Irish Titan, don't we?
Sláinte. We're Irish Titan. We take our commitment to building and growing e-commerce channels very seriously. For you Simon Sinek fans, we have a golden circle. Our why is business first, online second. Our how is partnerships, not transactions. And our what is building and growing e-commerce channels. Irish Titan has 3 uniques. So if nothing else, please remember these 3 things. First is business first, online second. Second is our Titan only model. And third is our high touch, deep expertise, full service experience. Business first, online second. That's our why, and it means that it's not about bits and bytes or pixels or keywords. It's about how e-commerce amplifies your business strategies. Our Titan-only model means that 100% of our work is done by our employees, who we refer to as our Titans. No contractors, freelancers, or offshore resources. And lastly, Irish Titan's high-touch, deep expertise, full-service approach has been offering a white glove, green glove, experience in building and growing e-commerce channels since 2004. Thanks again, Sláinte.
Yeah, thank you to Irish Titan. If you're trying to sell anything online or raise money online, go talk to Darren, because that's what they do. So the reason Darren sponsors the Good Leadership Breakfast has a lot to do with this tool that I want to introduce you to now. If you're brand new to us, please pull out a pen. Those of you who've been here and done this 50 or 60 times, be a good role model for the new people, will you please? So one of the things that we're learning on the journey of good leadership, working on organizational effectiveness, is why people commit to your organization and why they seek accountability. In the research, we're learning that far too many people think of accountability as a punitive concept in their organization. The majority think that way. And what we're learning is the opposite of punitive is healthy. And when people think about accountability as healthy, they think about it as a growth opportunity. We invented this tool many, many, many years ago. And this is an opportunity to help understand what's going on in the lives of people who are important to you, and including yourself, and to kind of think about your life as a growth opportunity. So this is called the 7F's wheel. The 7F's are concepts that are really important. They start with the letter F, and they're faith, family, finances, fitness, friends, fun, and future. This is a self-assessment for you to do of yourself right now, today. It's a very simple scale. How satisfied are you? 10 means it couldn't be any better. 1 means it couldn't be any worse. So we're going to start with the letter, with faith at the top of the circle. Just give yourself an assessment quickly. How satisfied are you with your spiritual life? 10 means it couldn't be any better. 1 means it couldn't be any worse. Don't overthink it. Select a number, and then let's move on. Family. The definition of family is how satisfied are you with your loved ones who share a common sense of home. Next is finances. It's not about how much money you have in your pocket or your checkbook or your portfolio. It's how well does your money fund your priorities. Fourth is fitness. You know, Chad, you just talked about pulling a muscle and reaching into the glove box, right? So fitness means a lot different to me now than it did when we invented this when I was 35 years old. So give yourself a score. How satisfied are you with a healthier body? 1 through 10. Friends, these are the people who share your joys and disappointments. We think you can make wonderful friendships at work these days. Give yourself a score 1 through 10. Fun, this is my favorite definition. It's the part of your life that's playful and joyful. And then finally, future. How satisfied are you with the hope that you have for yourself and others? So 1 through 10 there. And then when you complete that exercise, I hope you did it, just do the kindergarten exercise and connect the dots. And as you're connecting the dots, just be aware. Be aware of what's going on in your 7F's wheel. At Good Leadership, we believe you can grow as much on the 7F's wheel in your work life as you can in your home life. We also believe that if you understand what's going on in the 7F's wheel on the people on your team, they will commit to a higher level degree to that team, and that commitment translates into healthy accountability. Not only do we believe it, but we proved it with our research. And so I want to send you, what I'm going to do is give you 2 minutes right now at your table to discuss what's going on in your 7F's wheel. Just turn to the person next to you and just have a really quick little intimate conversation about what's going on in your life with your 7F's wheel. And if you didn't do the exercise, you have to make it up. Ready, set, go.
Okay, thank you for that. Over the course of the Good Leadership Breakfast, we have collected over $422,000 in donations that have gone to over 100 different organizations. Okay, and now it's time for me to introduce the creator of the Good Leadership Breakfast. He is an informed act against the bad news bias in the media, and he's a thought leader on organizational effectiveness. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the CEO and founder of Good Leadership Enterprises and a role model for how good...
It's a beautiful bridge to how I intend to open today. So those of you who were here a year ago, today is November 17. November 18 last year, we did the 100th episode of the Good Leadership Breakfast here in this room. It was a hell of a party for 7 in the morning. And there were several things that made it memorable. All of the people who were here was certainly one of those things. But also, we have had, by the time we'd done 100 breakfasts, we had 89 different speakers. The format changed a little through the years, so that's how the math works. But 63 of those speakers were here in the room, filling this lower level. It was absolutely amazing. And this, we had them sign this. We had an intern who helped us figure out how to make November 18 National Goodness Pays Day in perpetuity. And so 63 of the speakers signed this thing, and tomorrow is November 18. So if you look into your LinkedIn feed tomorrow, we'll put a notice out there about how tomorrow, is National Goodness Pays Day, and we would really appreciate it if you liked it, commented, send it around, because our mission is to spread goodness. And that's one of the ways you can do that. So let's give it up for that National Goodness Pays Day, which is tomorrow. So today is our 106th Good Leadership Breakfast. We've been doing this for 14 years. And those of you who've been here at the spring series, I'm sorry, I forgot this. This is Jennifer Meister, who is showing this poster at the 100th breakfast. So shame on me, I got to advance my own slides. Here's the biggest trend we've spotted in 14 years of doing this. Most organizations now have made the mindset shift away from a traditional culture that's hierarchy, based on hierarchy and chain of command, where you get accountability through compliance and following the rules. The whole, well, my boss didn't tell me I can do that thing has kind of evaporated now, and we moved over into this model. Most successful organizations that we're working with are thinking about their organizations this way. We call it a goodness culture, and it's a collaboration-based environment where power is no longer condensed in the hands of 1 or 2 people. It's distributed to a whole bunch of people. And through that, it's a teams of teams environment. That's supported by that data we just collected there. And then accountability in this model, on the right-hand side of this slide, has to come from negotiating shared commitments back and forth. It's a powerful trend. I mean, if you think about it, who wants to go backwards to the other side of the model? It's just not very much an appealing idea these days. So what's fascinating about this, I think, is that we've really made this the focus of what we've been doing. Our spring series, we had 3 speakers, and we asked a bunch of questions like we did in this fall series, and we wrote this bright paper called Winning with a Goodness Culture. If you don't have this, just tell us, send me an email or info@goodleadership, and we'll send it to you. And it was foundational for how we carried out this series, and we're going to show you how it carries out into next year as well. One of the things that we've noticed is if you've made the mindset shift and you want to be thriving, there are 3 things you have to get right. The first one ties to the data we just collected. The teams at the top need to be aligned. And so we like to say it this way. All employees know this, that if the teams at the top are not aligned, then everyone suffers one way or another. And so having a process to know for sure that your teams are aligned is important. Second thing is the data we just collected about how many teams you're on. The organizations that have a consistent teaming methodology, they spent the time and energy training managers and team leaders to do things relatively the same way. It reduces the whiplash that people feel by moving from team to team. And then finally, this one is the most controversial. It's really important to understand, based on your strategy, which roles in the organization are absolutely mission critical. They have to fire on all cylinders, and you need to have A players there. Because when we get inside an organization and we interview, they will tell us exactly, immediately, who are the C players in the spots that are most important to their success, and they get ornery. So these are the three things we learned in looking for. We had to help her understand that there's a relational part of leadership that's equally as important as the structural side of leadership. And eventually they were thriving, but not without a whole bunch of hijinks going on in the organization. And to explain some of the things that we had to help them do, I'm going to bring Kevin back up here. We've got another poll that'll round out the 3 questions we're asking today. So Kevin, I'm going to advance the slide, and you can tell us what we're going to do.
All right, so again, if you would just pull out your phone, go ahead and click on the QR code or go to the website. Respond to this item. How many teams in your organization are externally focused? Externally focused. Often we think about commercial teams being externally focused, and everyone else is kind of internally. Is that how it works for you, or do your teams really think about that outside part? So a little data collection music as we're thinking about that, and we'll be back in a moment. All right. Well, again, we did some data collection prior to coming in. And so prior to coming into the breakfast, we asked some folks the same question. About 50%, 48% said very few or a very small percentage. Let's see if that's the same for us here or if we see our teams differently. So data collected inside the room, most of our teams, or about half, we say, are externally focused. So a real difference in how we think about that from a goodness mindset, how other leaders might be thinking about that. So reflect on as you go back to your organization today. Are your organization team members and leaders thinking about teams being externally focused, or are they internally focused and creating?
Between people who are not familiar with good leadership and goodness concepts, it tells us a story every single time. And I really love the fact that you've created a genre called data collection music. Yeah, that's hysterical. I keep thinking, could I put that in Spotify? What would it give me, right? So here, as part of the signature story, I want to call your attention to this. You all have one of these. It's called the 7F's wheel. You saw it when we introduced Darren Lynch. This is something that's been alive in the good leadership circle since day one. And what's interesting about this particular technique is it can be used in a number of ways. If you decide that you'd like to do a 7F's wheel exercise with your family at Thanksgiving, we'll send you the PDF. Because people have done this a number of times. And what's interesting about this is when we think about it individually, this can seem like a fun exercise, kind of like frosting. But when we use this in the context of a structural leader like Adriana, this is cake. So one of the ways we got her to think about her leadership differently was this exercise. I'm going to explain it. The 7 F's in alphabetical order are faith, family, finances, fitness, friends, fun, and future. We list them alphabetically because any other way would be political. So it begins with faith, it ends with future, and right there in the middle is that one of those numbers, 1 through 10 on faith. The next one is family. How satisfied are you with your loved ones who share a common sense of home? You might be thinking about Thanksgiving coming up. You could, fill that one in. Circle one of those numbers, please. Finances. It's important that you listen to the definition here. How satisfied are you with how your money funds your priorities? It's not a question about how much you have in your pocket or your portfolio at this moment in time. Fourth is fitness in the middle. How satisfied are you with the health of your body? If you're on the whiskey and chocolate diet that Chatty was talking about, maybe not so good, huh? How satisfied are you with the health of your body? Friends, how satisfied are you with the people who share your joys and disappointments? There's a lot of friendships in this room. Fun. How satisfied are you? We like to think this is a pathway to a well-rounded life. We also know that the wheel is the symbol of momentum in physics. So the question here, when you look at your 7S wheel, is will your 7S wheel roll? What I'd love for you to do right now, I hope you did this exercise, because if you didn't, this might be kind of tough. I want you to turn right to the person next to you. I'm going to give you 90 seconds. Just make a comment about your 7S wheel to the person next to you. Ready, set, go. This is the hardest I have to work all day, is to figure out how to get you back out of your 7F's wheel conversation. What our leader in the signature story in the book, Adriana, what she learned was that she found the process to be beautiful. She literally wrote on the top of her yellow pad, "This is beautiful," and this is how she got there. Once this team had a retreat that lasted from noon on one day till noon on the other, all they did was invest in one another's lives, to think about, when we turn this thing around 3 years from now, 7 years from now, how are your lives going to be different? They started with the 7F's wheel. They worked on all sorts of powerful conversations about how they could get into the 9 or 10 zone on their 7F's wheel. And then at our recommendation the next day, she let the team talk by themselves for about 90 minutes. And the conversation was going to be, how do we drive the harmony out of this team? They were set up to kind of keep everybody happy. And as a result, they were missing what was going on in their market and in their own organization. And the team came up with their own observation that the tension inside their team was all internal turf battles. They'd lost sight of what was going on with their best customers. So they were talking about, why can't we do things like 7F's wheel with our best customers? Let's invest in their lives. And they came to the conclusion that if our customers are succeeding, we will succeed too. And then she was able to dive in there with her natural instincts about how to do planning and organizing and operational things to really turn up the excellence in the organization. But they didn't want any part of it until she invested in them with the 7F's wheel. It's not frosting, it's cake. So as we move forward, I'm going to introduce you to somebody who really understands this concept exceptionally well. Our speaker today is Archie Black. To understand Archie professionally is to understand that he recently retired, and I met him about 5 years ago, and he said, "Yeah, I'll talk at your breakfast, but not until I retire." So I remembered, so thank you for saying yes. SPS Commerce, I'll have him tell you a little bit about it. It's a fantastic organization. There are many SPS Commerce people here in the room today. Thank you for being here. They're a top 1% of the tech companies on NASDAQ. And this next thing is absolutely extraordinary. When we start talking about accountability, they have an incredible track record, 93 quarters in a row of hitting their sales goals. This is a publicly traded company that knows how to hit that top line number in ways that every single other client we have at Good Leadership would just love to have. Probably most important, he grew up as a multi-sport athlete. He is an athlete. And he's raising 4 boys. They love family travel. He was just telling me about their ski place out west. And he has a real passion for literacy, which I'm sure he's going to tell us about. Please join me in welcoming Archie Black. Thanks for being here. Yeah, you'll go over this side over here.
Boy, the athlete part is a little bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah.
But I'll take it.
You still look good to me there, for sure. So when you hear the words good leadership is a team sport, what comes to mind?
Well, for as well,
Sure,
because we always sit between two parties. So we are a relational business
Yeah.
at the very, very core. It's a network. One of our key assets, and we talk about all the time, is network. Our vision statement is to be the world's retail network. So, and by the way, if employees are told, if you have an idea for me that's not within our vision statement, I have no interest in it.
Yeah, I have
So,
no interest in it.
I have no
That's
interest
the
in it.
simple
'Cause
accountability.
We're very, very focused as an organization.
So, how did you learn this philosophy? So, I mean, it's a big question, but I want to say, would you tell us how you grew up and what some of the pivot points were that got you to the CEO chair at SPS Commerce?
Yeah. So, grew up not too far from here. Pretty privileged background. Family structure was very strong. Parents were of strong faith, gave back to the community, were very kind to people. So a lot of great things there. I don't know that there's a pivot point. You know, you think about that pivot point. You know, I tell anybody that's new in their career or longer in their career, it's like, look, you got to get some.
We move the breakfast forward. So thank you. There you go, Paul.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate it. So the most meaningful part about my job is the search for people who we invite to be speakers. And this is where I commend you as an audience of guests who are interested in goodness. I really do take your referrals seriously. Our speaker today came because one of you who's in the room today came up to me and said, "Oh my God, you gotta meet my boss. He's gonna be the perfect good leadership speaker." And that was a little over a year ago. So I'm inviting you. If you work with a good leader that you really believe has a lot to share with this crowd, particularly around the subject of spreading the concept of healthy accountability, I want to hear from you. So without any further ado, I want to introduce you to a person who has a lot of his formative years around leadership were formed in the military. We haven't had very many speakers who can claim that. We're going to talk about this a little bit. He also has a commercial leadership background at places like Best Buy. We know what that is, right? Rockwell Automation and several others. He'll tell you about that. And has a very storied career in nonprofit at the United Way, then the Children's Museum on his way to Washburn. He's not from Minnesota. How about that? Raise your hand if you're not from Minnesota. God, he's one of you then, right? Not yet one of us. No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. Somebody who loves cycling and has a father to an absolutely beautiful daughter, and his wife is here today. So please join me in welcoming Craig Warren. Thank you. For those of you who know that I usually wear the orange jacket in October, this is why I didn't wear the orange jacket today, okay? There you go. So Craig, I'm so happy to have met you. It came from one of your colleagues here today, and you and I have talked a number of different times on a number of subjects, but today I'm really curious to find out what comes to mind for you when you hear the words, building a culture of healthy accountability.
Yeah, I really think about, compassion, I think about clarity, I think about focus, I think about outcomes. And I think about alignment.
You say that so clearly. It's amazing. This guy has a gift of articulation. So I want to ask you how you developed that. So the question here is, let's back up a little bit. So you sit here today in charge of a marvelous organization. I'm going to ask you to talk to us about what that organization does here in a second. Mm-hmm. Your journey is different than many other people that have come as a speaker here at Good Leadership Breakfast. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how did you grow up and what was some of that trajectory to get you here?
Yeah, I guess as I think about how I grow up, Paul, I think about place and space. In terms of place, was born in New Jersey, and then we moved away. So stayed there until I was in kindergarten, then we moved to Connecticut, then we moved to Maryland, then we moved to Massachusetts and came back to New Jersey. So kind of the Northeast, literally the Northeast corridor is sort of where I grew up geographically, so solidly East Coast. with a strong affinity for New Jersey. And I think about place, I think about, I grew up loved in an environment where I was loved. I grew up in an environment where I was surrounded by black people who believed in the value of education. I grew up in a household where our faith was very present. So my father was Baptist, my mother was Episcopalian. She's the one who took us to church, so grew up kind of going to the Episcopal church on a regular basis. So faith was very present in our lives. And I'm the oldest of 3 children, so I had siblings. I grew up, with siblings. So I think those place things sort of defined me in terms of growing up. In terms of my professional journey, yeah, I like to characterize it as a little bit eclectic.
Okay.
When I was growing up, maybe dating myself a little bit, I did not perceive when I was growing up that there were a whole bunch of opportunities for African Americans.
Okay.
And I actually had 2 grandfathers who served in World War II, one in the Merchant Marine and one in the Army. So the idea of the military, and the Army in particular, was an area where I saw black people at the most senior levels in a way that I did not in the rest of society. I'm proud to be an American, so there was something about defending the ideals. We have rough edges and everything around that, but this is the country that I was born into and where I want to stay, so something about defending that. So I thought I might make a career out of the Army. And I went to ROTC, went through ROTC, thought I would got a deferment to go to grad school and got my master's in public policy because I thought that's where I'd be spending my career. At some point, I wouldn't be pounding ground. I'd be doing policy if I made a career of it. And then went on active duty in the Army and went to college and was in ROTC, got commissioned, went on active duty in the Army, and realized my first assignment was in South Korea. I was there for 18 months and realized when I came back from South Korea, I'm going to take away a lot from this experience. I am, in fact, not going to be a career military officer.
What was it, the food or what?
It was a variety of, and I think we'll talk about this later, about what I took away from that experience, because every day that experience impacts me in my leadership, but it was very constrained. It's a very much a seniority base where you might get promoted a little bit ahead, but you're not going to get promoted a lot ahead, and you got to pay your dues. You got to be at this level for a while, and then you go to this level. You're not going to be able to skip levels, which makes sense for the nature of the organization and what it does. But I realized that's not really aligned with me and how I want to operate and what the gifts I think I have to bear. So that didn't align with that, and I realized that. So then I got out of the Army. And I thought I would be going into the government. I'd have veterans preference, and I'd get a government job, or I'd do something in the nonprofit sector. And a friend of mine was a joint degree person in grad school at the business school and the policy school, and he went and worked for Deloitte Consulting. And when I was getting out, he said, "You should spend a couple of years in the private sector. I know you want to spend your career in the social sector. I'm telling you, man, you should spend 3 to 5 years in the private sector, and you'll get experiences there that'll transfer back to the social sector that you will not be able to replicate." And I was like, I was a little skeptical. I was a political science and anthropology major in undergrad, and I have a master's degree in public policy. But the private sector was not.
You were on the other side of campus.
That was not. That was not my thing. But then I realized that the private sector likes junior military officers, because most college graduates are responsible for their laptop and their chair, and they're not responsible for leading fairly large teams, responsible for millions of dollars of equipment, leading people to very aggressive outcomes under very challenging circumstances. And businesses can teach you their business. They can't replicate the crucible of leadership that a lot of junior military officers, and I would argue all veterans, have as a result of that experience. So I'm like, someone will hire me. So I'm like, all right, I'll try it out. And then he said, you should look at consulting. And I was like, you just got me over the hump of considering the private sector. I do know what consultants do, and those companies pay people who know a lot more than they know to help them improve their companies. Like, why would that work? And he's like, yeah, but you're only going to do it for a couple of years. Like, a consulting firm will teach you how to analyze and improve any type of organization. You'll get to work across not only a variety of companies, you'll get to work across entirely different industries. So do you want, like, an experience in one company, or do you want, like, this richer experience if you're not going to do it forever? Which was actually brilliant counsel.
This guy sounds like a salesman.
No, he was consultant.
Yeah, there you go. What can I say?
He still is.
There we go.
So I'm like, all right, I'll try it. And I wound up spending time in consulting. And consulting opened up my world. And I was like, oh, I can do this. And this is interesting. And I'd never really considered this path of what this likes. And this is interesting. And I have an aptitude. for this. So wound up working for a larger firm, Towers Perrin, that doesn't exist anymore. Wound up having my own firm for a couple of years. Coca-Cola was a client of mine. They wanted me to come work for them, and that kind of led to my kind of corporate career in the shared services space with Coca-Cola, with Rockwell Automation in Milwaukee, and coming out to Minnesota, actually with Best Buy, as they were starting shared services. But throughout all that, my younger self and my true self was still there of, this isn't really your purpose. Like, you're getting to travel around the world, the work is cool, like the money's good, but I felt like part of my soul was actually getting eaten away, because I'm like, this wasn't me. Like, there's nothing wrong with that, but for me, something about service resonated with me, with my values and purpose, and it turned out it was not military service, but I still felt it was something in service. So I transitioned back to the nonprofit sector. It was at United Way as an executive, and then the Children's Museum, and now at Washburn. And a thread for me, since I've come back to the nonprofit sector, has been kids. Like, United Way continues to have a focus on investing in children. The Children's Museum is all about kids learning and developing through play, and Washburn is about nurturing the well-being of children and their families through transformative mental health care. So sort of a personal passion for children I've been able to manifest professionally.
Yeah, that's a theme of people who've been here sitting in that chair talking about their journey. And a lot of times we learn about what we want by learning what we don't want.
Yep.
And so the idea that you really were passionate about the well-being of children and families, I think is, it's amazing, and I want to ask you about that here in a second. I'd love to backtrack to your military time.
Yep.
Can you articulate for us, what did you learn from a leadership standpoint by the opportunities that you had and the responsibilities you had in the military?
Like everything. Like, I really am so grateful for that experience, and I also think about the fact that that began when I was in college. So actually being in ROTC with the outcome of going through that for the full 4 years, with the outcome of you being a leader in that, is very different, because I realize now most people in college don't even know what job they want. They're certainly not thinking about, I'm working towards being, my first job will be a leadership role. I will not be an individual contributor, I will be leading people. So I've always had the mindset of a leader mindset. I've never had like the individual contributor, like it's just gonna be me. I have trained and developed and cultivated. It's always about other people and how am I as a leader in service to other people. So I take that away. I take away, people can respect the rank and they'll do stuff, but that's not gonna motivate them to realize their full potential. And frankly, as a leader, I am not going to be my best as a leader if the people who are on my team only are doing things because of respect for the position, as a respect for me as a leader. I took that away from that. I took away the complexity of, there's a lot of churn around equity and inclusion now. And for me, that was very real at the time I was in the Army, because you have to think about, the Army was segregated for many years. It was one of the first branches of the military and parts of American society to integrate. But it was segregated for a period of time. And in the history of our country, with the internment of Japanese Americans, was what happened with indigenous peoples even here in this state and throughout the country. So the Army has a complicated history around people who always were Americans, people who were not perceived as being Americans in terms of defense and some of the things we've done abroad. So there's a complicated organizational history of which my own identities at time were not represented and valued even within that history specific to me. And I took away this experience of being in an organization that I believed in some of the values, but had done some things that were not aligned with my communities that I cared about. And how do you lead in that? And how do you stay in an organization and change that, when at the time that I was an armor officer. The branch that I was in, women couldn't serve. Like, women could serve in the Army, but in the branch I was in, which was considered a combat arm, women could not serve in that branch. And the cultural impact it has when you're literally saying, it's in statute, it's in the law, women cannot do this. And the people who do these roles are the ones who are going to advance to the top of the organization. And the intentional impact of you're valuing one identity over another identity over an extended period of time, and how that devalues that and leads to things like how women are perceived, what the opportunities are, the instances of sexual assault, like all of that stuff is related, and I got to see that. I was there in the era of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, which was an advancement of, that would actually was progress at the time when I was there, but that still is not progress, where because you're gay, you can't serve, and if you openly serve, you're gonna get kicked out. It has nothing to do with your ability to do the job. So being in an organization where these values that are very important to me, even as I was there, that were in conflict with that, but how do you move forward with that? And how do you hold that where that organization still has value? And are you at a point for what role can you play from your seat as a leader towards making change and laying the foundation for change that happens over time. Where now women are in the branch that I was in, women are now serving in that branch. You know, you can be transgender, openly transgender, beyond even being gay, that's certainly accepted, and you can even be transgender, and that's accepted, and that's more normed, whereas 25 years ago, that was not the case. But that was, I feel like part of my presence in that was grappling with that and helping me grapple with that in other organizations of really what does that mean and be inclusive, and those structural barriers are real, and what does that look like for creating a more inclusive environment that I took away in a very tangible way that I continue to grapple with.
Aren't you glad I asked that question? Yeah, amazing. That it's an amazingly rich firsthand accounting of what you can take away in a context of, I mean, how many people in the room here served in the military? Yeah, very, very, I mean, thank you for that. And it's, I think had I done this Good Leadership Breakfast 3 decades ago, started it then, I would have a very different perspective from guests who come in as our speakers. So thank you very much for that. Let's talk about some of your pivot points. I know you talked a lot about your history. So there must have been 1 or 2 things that happened. Certainly the conversation with the consultant salesperson who said you got to be in consulting was one of those. Do you have a couple more?
Yeah, the end of my, part of the end of my consulting career. So was in the Army, got out of the Army, went into a consulting firm. The consulting firm I was at it was primarily known as a human resources consulting firm.
Okay.
But the practice I was in was a general management consulting practice.
Okay.
They got a new CEO. New CEO hires consultants to come in and look at their strategy. Strategy says, hey, this practice is profitable, but we're really, really, really profitable in this other area, and there's more potential to grow here and grow the brand that. So they gutted my practice. So a couple of years after coming out of the Army, doing consulting, and they let go 300 of us in my practice around the world. And at this time, layoffs and everything are much more common, I feel like now, where there's not a value judgment around like good people get let go because that's just part of the cycle of business now. We were probably on the cusp of that transition, so that still was like, oh my gosh, the people who get laid off, they're like duds. Like, am I ever going to be able to find work again? And I did this corporate thing, and now this isn't working out, and I got to go back. Like, what is this going to do? And that was very emotionally devastating. Because it's just layoffs was not, that was something you wanted to avoid. Then unless there was like shutting down a factory or something like that. But so that was very emotionally devastating. But out of that came this opportunity to be an entrepreneur. That was another thing that I wasn't envisioning, that to go off on my own and create my own consulting practice and do work with that, which was great for me to try that and to try out something that I did that for several years. I don't like that. At that point in my life, I did not want to be an entrepreneur after doing that. And I also had the confidence, though, that when my identity is not defined by what I do. So I was very worried about my identity being taken away and how it would be perceived. And that was the beginning of a journey that I'm still on of separating my worth and self-esteem from what I do. And I'm grateful that I had that opportunity almost 25 years ago or so to have that, to begin that journey of separating that very painfully, because that has done me in good stead of like, my worth and value isn't tied to what I do. That is a manifestation of my worth, but that does not define my worth, and I took that away from that. And things will work out. Like when things happen in your career that aren't what you choose, having that lesson earlier on of it went totally sideways, and I had to consider paths that I'd never considered before and to be open to that. So I took a lot away. That was really a pivot point in terms of being open to what's possible, and sometimes doors open and you need to be, hey, this opened, and I need to be sensitive that it opened, even if it wasn't something I was expecting to open, and then kind of being taking risk and kind of leaning into that.
So who opened the door for you to Washburn Center for Children?
The United Way did, actually. It's interesting how I feel like in my life there's circles, and the circles kind of go apart and they come back together. So when I was at United Way, we actually funded Washburn.
Okay.
So I actually became of Washburn because they were one of our grantees when I was at United Way, and I actually met the CEO when I was at United Way, and we would get together and kind of, even when I left United Way, we'd still meet once or twice a year just to sort of talk. So when a recruiter reached out to me about an opportunity about Washburn several years later, I was aware of Washburn and knew the great work that they did, and I was aware of the CEO, who was the CEO. So I'm like, this is interesting to me. And because of the combination of that, that's what kind of led me to Washburn, because I knew the work. And I'd done in the nonprofit sector, which I knew is where I wanted to stay. I'd been in philanthropy with United Way. At the time, I was at the Children's Museum of Art and Culture, and I was like, I want to be in more direct service. And direct service in healthcare is something I hadn't done, so that really resonated with me.
Well, as much as I was passionate about the Timberwolves last month with Ethan Casson giving me the jersey, I'm actually way more passionate about where the welfare of our children and families are. And I would just love for you to take a few minutes to just tell us, from your perspective, what do we need to know about the welfare of children in our community?
Yeah, I think specifically, I guess my lens is through the perspective of mental health. And I'll say I think it's unfortunate that I need to share this because a lot of people don't know this, but we're in the midst of a children's mental health crisis that actually started before COVID. So we've been in the throes of a children's mental health crisis, unfortunately, for quite some time that only intensified during the course of COVID and continues to this day. And what that looks like is about at least at least 20% of children today are experiencing some form of grief, anxiety, depression, or some other type of mental illness.
Yeah, so 20%.
Yeah, and we also see, if you talk to school principals, the number one issue school principals are worried about the kids in their school is mental health. If you talk to parents, the number one issue with parents is mental health. If you look at our wait lists are at much higher levels, and our other kind of organizations that deal with children's mental health are also seeing wait lists in much higher levels of demand. So that's indicative of a crisis that existed before COVID, some things that happened during COVID, which developmentally for kids have brought to fore mental health issues that would not have existed had we not been in that environment, and which exacerbated underlying mental health issues. So there's a lot going on right now with kids and their mental health that is not favorable, that unfortunately we don't see that declining. Like, unfortunately, I mean, I'd love to be out of business, frankly. But unfortunately, we're still seeing, and as I talk to my peers, and some of them are here today, there's a lot of demand for children's mental health services that are at levels that did not exist in the past.
So help us understand what your team, how large is your team?
Yep.
And what does your team do in this context?
Yep, so Washburn, because I know there's corporate people here, so we're about $26 million in revenue. We have about 260 employees currently, and what we do is psychotherapy. So there is a full continuum on, I guess if you look at the mental health care continuum, very much simplified. There's outpatient, there's inpatient, and there's residential. Our scope of services is a full range of services on the outpatient continuum, and our focus really is on kids. So we are 141 years old. They've been around for a long time. We're community-based, and our focus is on psychotherapeutic services for kids from birth up to age 18. And one of the things that's unique about us is a couple of our specialties are that we're culturally responsive, we're trauma-informed. We actually are the provider in the community that a lot of other providers would be like, wow, this kid and this family is really dealing with some stuff. We're not up to dealing with that, and we kind of take everything and try to support everyone. And we do that from our 3 facilities. We have our main facilities in Minneapolis, not that far from here. We have satellite locations in Brooklyn Park and Edina. We have our clinicians embedded in over almost 60 schools in Burnsville, Eagan, Savage, Minneapolis, Bloomington, Eden Prairie, and Columbia Heights. We deliver our services at places like this, in coffee shops, in people's homes, and we have partnerships with 3 of the large healthcare systems, mHealth Fairview, Allina, and Children's, where we partner with them around an acute response model for kids who are admitted to their emergency department. So we kind of have this robust continuum of care for varying levels of acuity to meet kids of all ages and their families wherever they're at. And that's sort of what we, our jam is psychotherapy. We do have, and I'll say this because I was on a panel recently, and it was with a child psychiatrist who's the CEO of another mental health, and her thing was we should do skills, not pills. Because a lot of things with kids is a tendency to go to medication as the solution for mental health issues, which may be part of the solution, but oftentimes for children who've experienced trauma, therapy is an important part of that may be in complement that, and some kids may not need medication, they may just benefit from therapy and may not need meds, and some people may need meds, but if you're gonna ramp down meds, you may need therapy in order to allow you to reduce the medication.
Yeah.
That's why I'm really proud about our focus really is we do allow and have relationships with several psychiatrists where we do need to do that care coordination around medication, but our focus really is on the value and benefit of psychotherapeutic services.
It's intense work. Yeah, thank you for doing that. Yeah, it's amazing. I'd love for you to describe for us sort of as succinctly as you can, what kind of culture are you trying to maintain in the context of all these talented psychotherapists who are touching some of the most troubled kids?
Well, I want to acknowledge some of them are here, so I want to
awesome.
just acknowledge
Well,
those
then,
Washburn
thank you.
folks here. So thank you for what they're doing. Our work is deeply personal. Other parts of healthcare, you break your arm, you come in, we do an x-ray, we figure out what it is, we put a cast on it, and you kind of move on. And you have to have a bedside manner and everything like that. But I don't really need a whole bunch of context around you to set your broken limb. Whereas our work is really about relationship and context.
Yeah.
So the idea of secondary trauma, of a lot of the families and kids who come to us have experienced pretty significant trauma and are continuing to experience that. And there is secondary trauma that our staff experience as they're supporting these kids and families with that, which is very real. So a big focus of our culture is how do we hold and respect that? How do we allow you as a therapist or someone who's interacting with the kids and families we serve to hold on their behalf an overabundance of hope? Because a lot of times when people come to us, I hope none of you experience this who have kids have experienced this, but when you're figuring out that something with your kid is mental health related, then figuring out, well, what support, it's a much more frustrating process than they have a fever or you sprain your ankle or you broke your arm. It's a lot more, it's a much more complicated process. So a lot of times when people come to us, the hope is kind of low. So we need to have that overabundance of hope, and our culture needs to sustain that. Where we know there's a wait list, where there's going to be waves and waves of people who are waiting to get care after this person goes away. We know we need to be there with that family, to be in relationship with them, to get context with them, and that to do that, we have to give of ourselves in order to establish that relationship with the family, so they'll give us the context and information we need about them so we can figure out how we support them. That's deeply personal and has a lot of emotional labor. So a big part of our culture is around how do we hold and respect that compassion? How with families who are dealing really hard things and we're helping them navigate that, do we hold hope for ourselves? So when we're among ourselves, how do we fill our cups with that? Because sometimes things don't end the way that we want them to end. But we gotta have hope. We don't know, but we wanna have hope, but sometimes it doesn't. How do we do that, and how do we take care of ourselves? And what does it look like for you to take care of your emotional well-being and your physical well-being? Because if you're physically fit and everything, that helps with that, but that emotional piece of how do we do that? So how do we have a culture that supports clinical consults? Where you come together with other therapists to kind of process and decompress and be supported around that? How do we create spaces for joy? Because a lot of our work is with kids, and a lot of our work involves play with kids. So how do we maintain that joy and that sense of playfulness with us as we're navigating hard things, and as we're doing that and creating space for that joy? And how do we have accountability within that? And that's one of the things I'm so excited about the work that you all are doing, because our work isn't linear.
Yeah.
So there may be a step back, there may be sideways. It's not like you break your arm, we put a cast on, you take it off, you do physical. There's a pretty linear progression for a lot of physical health things. Our work doesn't go that way. So we need to really hold that it's not linear, and how do we support you within that, have a culture that does that and holds you with that. So we try to be fun, we try to have connection, because a lot of our people, as I talked about, are not together in a team where it's like, I'm gonna reach across the cubicle and see you. No, I may even be in the same school district, but I'm in the middle school when you're in the elementary school, so we're in the same district, but I'm not actually getting the benefit of connecting with you. So how do we make the teams have connection? How do we bring the organization to have connection? And how do we express gratitude? Because part of that, when it's really hard, you may not know the impact you're having. Because if I provide services to you for 6 months or a year, and then you go away, if you don't come back, and I kind of hope you don't. But if you do, we're there for you, but I kind of hope I may never hear from you again, because we've done what you needed to do and you got the support you needed and you go on. Well, we don't know. So we feel like you're good enough, we've done the care plan, we're treatment ready to end services, but we don't kind of know where you go with that. So having that, hearing about that, and getting people in space with that to understand the impact that we have.
Well, we interviewed some of your people to find out what some of your success habits were in keeping this culture alive. And so for those of you who are new to us, we do success habit research as sort of a gift to give back to our speakers. And we interview people in the organization and say, if you have learned something from Craig that you would want to take on to the next place, what are those things? What are Craig's success habits? And so we have 3 that we want to share with you. And the first one, people said, without a doubt, every single person, he is laser focused on mission. So, I mean, I think I understand why that's important, but how do you do it?
You put it front and center. Right? And that's something I learned from the Army. The Army had a lot of redundancy. So we needed to understand why we were doing something, because in the nature of work we were doing, people might not be there to accomplish that. So if every level didn't really understand, well, why are we doing this? And if those levels were not around as the mission progressed, then they need to know what we were carrying forward to do. And that's just stayed with me, of being clear around how does this relate to where we need to go? And are we constantly checking back? Because there's a lot of things in the environment that can distract us, some of which are valid, some of which are invalid, of how are we rooted in, what is our purpose here? And are we constantly grounding back in, what are we doing is this helping the mental health of the kids and families in our community? How does it do this? Does it not do that? Could it do that? And grounding in that. I think in kind of having, like it says, a laser sharp focus on let's reground back into mission in terms of how does this relate to this? And if it doesn't, then why are we doing it? And maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And just being very, my board members will talk about this, that I have our mission in every deck. Whenever I talk about something and everything, our mission, vision, values, people get tired of seeing that, but it's always there because I think we need to ingrain. It's very easy to get distracted, so you've got to have a systemized way of constantly literally having it in front of you all the time to say like, whoa, oh, I kind of forgot we didn't talk about it, but this doesn't feel aligned with that because I've sort of embedded that in.
And that's why we put goodness pays in the upper left-hand corner of everything for good leadership. How about the second one, requiring staff to ask clear questions? This is intriguing to me. Please explain this. I'm
incredibly curious, and I feel that's benefited me in my personal life and professional life, and I think that's good because I think curiosity provides a way of challenging without challenging. And I am not from here. So Minnesota nice drives me bonkers. I'm a lot more direct.
Me too, and I'm from South Dakota.
Yeah, I'm a lot more direct than that. So I found in particular in Minnesota, and just in general, questions provide a way of like, I don't understand that. I'm curious about that. Like, what does this mean? And that is a way for you to kind of challenge things in a constructive way without it being sort of a direct confrontation, and also in a way that you're inviting people in. So I'm like, I don't understand this, I'm curious about this, can you help this make sense to me? And inviting that with people to ask that of me as a leader, and to ask that of them. So we have a dynamic that sort of is a kind of continuous improvement environment without naming it, without some of the Six Sigma and some of the more formal things that are more prevalent in the private sector. But those questions do that. You're constantly thinking about what's going on, why are we doing this, how are we doing that, could we do it better? And I think forcing people to like really ask very clear questions hones in on some of those things.
My guess is that took a little while to get used to, that style of yours.
I don't know that people are used to it.
Yeah, but maybe not yet. Yeah, somebody will give me a signal when they're used to it, okay? So the last one here is this thing called contemplative action. Carefully considering multiple dynamics, and it's obvious, it's spending time with you like this, and everybody can see you think on a lot of planes. Will you explain this to us?
Yeah, I'm a Star Trek fan, the original series.
Okay.
And one of the things I love about that is there is a game in that was three-dimensional chess.
Oh, three-dimensional chess.
And I love the metaphor of, as I think professionally, I'm always thinking about three-dimensional chess.
Okay.
Because chess is about, you're thinking, well, how does this move position me for this move after that and after that? And when you add that other dimensions, you're even adding more complexity in your capacity to think through more complexity with all those moves and how that fits together. And I think that's really, really important as a leader. And it's one of the things I took away from the Army is before, it can be very kinetic, frantic environments, but you're kind of trained to always take some time to reflect and plan. And always take, even if it's 5 minutes or 2 minutes or a minute or 20 minutes, or if you have a longer horizon for more, but always as a leader, carve out some time for you to be thinking about, like, what exactly do we need to do? What are the possible scenarios for that? And to get input from people if you can do that. So you're not just reacting to things from emotional or from just reacting from an immediate reactive perspective. You're constantly pausing and taking the space to reflect on what exactly is happening, what's going on for me emotionally, what's going on emotionally for the team, what do we need to do, and are there ways of doing that? So you can sort of navigate and not box off possibilities, because you can't control things. But I think that reflection can say, oh, yeah, I don't want to do that, because if we do that, that's going to rule out these other things. I'm not sure about these, but they're not going to rule out things, so I think I need to do that. So that contemplative action is always being in the moment of pausing, of what's going on for you, what's possible, and coming up with some type of plan for that. And I've just seen that be immensely successful emotionally for keeping my kind of capacity and energy up, and also for just pausing to consider a range of possibilities that if I just went like that, I wouldn't have considered. And it's like, maybe we don't need to move right now, or maybe there's a broader range of things that just that reflection kind of is useful creatively.
It's a really complex concept, and I really like it. I'm going to be thinking a lot about contemplative action. Maybe that'll be my State Fair T-shirt. Yeah. So JC is somewhere here.
Up in the upper deck.
Oh, way back there. So now everybody has to turn and kink their necks to see JC. What's your question or observation?
Yeah, so I have first-time breakfast attendee Peter Elsham here with a question for you, Craig.
Good morning, Craig. So I was just looking for some maybe quick strategies to help kind of create the safe space and open more doors for people maybe who have not felt safe or in a welcomed environment before. And then a follow-up question. You've talked about play a lot this morning. What is your play?
The play one is easier. I'm into video games. Like, I grew up with Atari 2600, and I was so excited when we got that, which compared to the ones now sucks. So being an adult where they have these things, it's like, oh, these aren't little blobs. You can actually see the resolution and their sound. My inner child is fulfilled. So my inner child is fulfilled through my PlayStation 5 and playing games. In terms of creating that culture, I really appreciate that question, Peter. I think a part of, I'd say a couple of things. One of them is psychological safety, in my mind, does not equal lack of discomfort. Because I think a lot of people conflate that. So you being in an environment that's psychologically safe, which for me means you feel comfortable being your authentic self, you feel comfortable being vulnerable, you feel comfortable sharing whatever's going on for you, are kind of the outcomes of an environment that's psychologically safe. That doesn't equate to you're going to be comfortable in that environment. You're not going to be harmed, but it doesn't mean you're going to be comfortable. And I think as a leader, as I look about creating that environment, I need to be vulnerable myself. Because you need to role model things for people to feel like that. So if I'm vulnerable around what I'm feeling, that creates space for people to do that. If I'm kind of like in the trust thing, if I'm sincere around, he's not BSing me. Like, I feel like he's not telling me what I want to hear. I don't like what he's saying necessarily all the time, but I know he's going to tell me what he authentically believes to be true or he authentically is sharing. And if he don't, he'll say that. I think that is a component of that because people know what they're going to. I'll tell you and share if I can, and if I'm not, I'll tell you I'm not comfortable or I can't do that right now, and even create space for people to do the same with that. And really being an active listener. Like, I mean, there's a lot of talk around inclusion, but there's a lot of work in my mind around my work is around people have different experiences to me, and I need to be mindful of doing my work in terms of who I am and what's going on for me. So when I experience something, where someone isn't experiencing something the way that I intended for them to experience it, or they just have a different set of experiences that's outside of my context, I shouldn't be triggered on that. Or I should minimize that and be aware of what's going on for me. Is this about the other person? Is this about me? And how, as a leader, continue to be present so they can continue to share that and engage and be curious about that so they can have the safety to have an honest dialogue. Because I think that type of space really builds psychological safety, and it lets people be themselves. And then when people are themselves, I feel like they're going to bring more of themselves. And whatever your outcome is, whether that's profitability or mission impact or whatever, when people are bringing all of that in and feel like that, I just think they operate at a higher level.
Excellent. We have 2 more questions for you, and then we have to give away some money, so we can't take all day here. So one of the questions we have for you now is an aspirational question. You said in some ways you wish you could work yourself out of business. So let's assume that's beyond 7 years from now, okay? What does success look like? If everything goes right, what does success look like in your organization 7 years from now?
I think we're continuing to grow in the number of kids we're serving. Because unfortunately, I do not see in the foreseeable future a decrease in the demand for children's mental health services. So I would hope that we're continuing to grow our capacity through adding staff and becoming more productive and efficient to see more of kids, to meet more of the need that I unfortunately think is going to continue to exist. I hope our turnover is low because we do what we do through people. And it's a very challenging workspace for mental health professionals now where the demand of people entering the field does not in any way, shape, or form match the supply of people entering the field
Yeah.
doesn't match the demand for services. So I'm hoping that we can retain the people that we have, and that they become even stronger and better clinicians, so we can serve more and get more efficient in that, and also that we can attract more people. And I hope we're financially sustainable. I didn't mention this, but we're a safety net provider. So what that means is about 50% of the kids and families we serve get their health insurance through some type of government program. There's another 25% that take advantage of our sliding fee scale, and the reimbursement rates from the government health insurers only cover about 60% of the cost of care. So there's a constant financial challenge, which us continue our commitment to being a safety net provider. And I hope that there's a legislative session coming. I know people are focused on the national election. This is also, next 2025 is a budget year for the state. So I hope that we, down the road, can activate where the state will put more funds into the reimbursement rates for mental and behavioral health, so that providers like Washburn and others can address that part of their financial sustainability and don't have to compromise in their commitment to serving the kids and families in our community who need it most.
Well, we all agree. So the final question is one we've been asking every speaker for the last 10 years, and that's, how do you know for sure that goodness pays for you in your leadership?
Because I'm here. I say that on a couple of levels. My great-grandfather was alive, like I remember him as a young child. My great-grandfather's father was enslaved. So there was a very tangible connection to me to the history of slavery in this country that's not like some academic thing. Like, I remember my great-grandfather being alive, and his parents were enslaved. And the fact that I'm here today doing what I'm doing in this space is a testament to that. And I'll say another indication is this space. I was in this breakfast when Ethan spoke. And I met a woman who learned that I was at Washburn, and she said to me, Washburn saved my child's life. And it was in that, and I talk about where we don't get to see what happens on the other side, because she's not, this was many years ago, but hearing someone like that in this space that you brought together with people who care about goodness, for us to have this interaction of a woman saying, the work you do is so meaningful because you saved my child's life. And she shared more about that, but that's goodness for what we do and the impact of that, and you creating space for us to have the gift of being able to see the impact that we have that we often don't.
You know what? Sponsors, ticket buyers, staff members, how about that? Thank you so much. So grateful that you're here. Absolutely. So now I'm inviting Julie up to finish her favorite part of the day. She's the one who gets to give away the money. So, Julie?
Great. Well, before we start, we have $1,000 to give to you as a thank you for speaking here today, to donate to the charity of your choice.
I wonder who else.
Yeah.
Good. Today we raised $1,903, so with the match, $3,806. So thank you for that. Okay, Craig, will you do us the honor of drawing a name?
Catherine Thunheim from Gustavus.
Oh, from Gustavus. Yeah. Yeah, here she comes.
Hi, Catherine. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you.
$3,806 to donate to a charity of your choice. First, can you first tell us a little bit who you are and where you work?
Yes, I'm Kathy Thunheim, and I'm in my 18th year at Gustavus Adolphus College, and the Botts family.
There's a gusty ring
so
right
special.
there. Yeah, right there, yeah.
Because Paul and Melinda and all three of their amazing kids are just outstanding ambassadors. So 15 years ago, this guy and I started the Gustavus Mentoring Program.
We did, yes.
And I was a business management professor, and he came alongside and said, let's get the alumni mentoring the students. So we have 433 students getting mentored. It is my privilege to give this money to that program.
Amazing. Thank you so much. How about that? How about that, Melinda? How about that? Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's goodness right there. Thanks, we're done. Wow. I had not heard the story about the woman whose kid was served by Washburn. That was amazing, and it's been a long time since we spread the Gusty goodness in the room here, so amazing things happening today. And, you know, as we head home today, I just want to say that we are reconvening in this room for the Good Leadership Breakfast on February 28th. The reason why it says mystery speaker is we have two people that we've invited who are both trying to make the date open so they can do it. So I can't tell you who they both are because, you know, I don't know which one's going to be. So, but we'll be back here in this room, and as we do in February, buy a ticket, bring somebody with you. So we'll be sending that message out to you here shortly, probably soon after the Good Leadership Conference, which is November 22nd here in this room. And several people have been asking questions about the conference. We set the conference up specifically to help spread the message of what we learned to the people who really participated in making it happen. I mean, Good Leadership, we've grown a lot over the years, but we're still not a big enough firm where we can tackle a project this big by ourselves. So we put out the line to our clients, our partners, and organizations and said, do you think this is a problem that deserves to be studied? The problem is this. Organizations are learning that despite the fact that we've increased flexibility and collaboration in the workforce, it hasn't necessarily paid back in accountability or organizational productivity. So we're trying to figure out what is the key. There are some organizations who have figured it out. We've talked to them. We're mining that data. We'll be sharing it back with the people who participated. The room will be about as big as it is here today. We also know that there are some people out there that participated in this research from far away. They don't live here in Minneapolis, St. Paul, and they're not necessarily using all of their tickets. So there are a couple of half tables available, and there might even be a couple of 2s and 3s available. So Jill Duvel, here from our firm, she's going to stand up and wave. She's the one who can get you in if you want to be a part of the conference. Why are we doing this work? Because we believe that organizations cannot be effective without good leadership. We also believe that you can't have good leadership without goodness. And finally, to have goodness, we know we need healthy accountability. Goodness is when people thrive together in a culture of encouragement, accountability, and positive teamwork. Encouragement and positive teamwork are beautiful, but it doesn't necessarily work unless you have accountability. Accountability is the glue that makes it work. So we're so grateful for your participation, the fact that you show up, the fact that you sponsor, the fact that you invite people to come with you. Without those invitations, we wouldn't really be anything. So this is our last Good Leadership Breakfast for this year. We will reconvene on February 28th for next year. And now's the time where I ask you the question, are you ready to go radiate goodness today? And we'll do it one more time. Are you ready to radiate goodness today? Thank you very much. See you next year.